Weeks of social unrest and public outrage have thrown France into chaos, with citizens demanding a strict decrease in rising living costs. With Emmanuel Macron facing a serious threat to his presidency, let's take a look at how the Yellow Vest protests currently stand after weeks of violent demonstrations across the country.
Chaos, crisis, and high-risk demonstrations. France has experienced weeks of social unrest since massive protests erupted across the country on November the 17th. The demonstrations were initially held to protest planned hikes in fuel taxes, but have since widened into a movement against the government's economic policies, leaving President Emmanuel Macron facing the biggest challenge of his presidency. Below is a timeline of the Yellow Vest movement in France, from the first online rumblings against the tax increase to nationwide protests and the worst Paris riots in decades. Saturday, November the 17th, is the first day of road blockades across France, with nearly 290,000 demonstrators wearing the fluorescent yellow vests motorists are required to carry in their cars. The protests are spontaneous and not organized by political parties or unions. The next day, Prime Minister Edouard Philippe says the government will not back down. The next protests take place the following Saturday, November the 24th. Thousands of demonstrators clash with police on the Champs-Élysées in Paris. More than 106,000 demonstrators are recorded across France, including 8,000 in Paris. Revised official numbers count 166,000. On November the 27th, Macron offers minor concessions, saying he would propose a mechanism to adjust the tax increases and calls for a 3-month national consultation. Unimpressed, the Yellow Vests call for a new protest on December the 1st on the Champs-Élysées. On November the 29th, Philippe meets a Yellow Vest protester. A day later, 2 accept his invitation, but 1 walks out over claims that the government threatened the representatives. The third day of protests take place on Saturday, December the 1st, with widespread violence erupting, particularly in Paris around the Arc de Triomphe and several upscale neighborhoods. On his return from the G20 summit in Argentina, Macron immediately calls a crisis meeting at the Élysée Palace on December the 2nd. Prime Minister Philippe meets with political party leaders on December the 3rd. Yellow Vests representatives announced they will not go to a meeting with Philippe planned the following day, later cancelled, as some say they have received death threats. Blockages of roads, shopping centres and fuel depots continue. Seizing on the momentum from the protests, students start demonstrating over education reforms, disrupting dozens of high schools every day from December the 3rd. On December the 4th, the government retreats. The Prime Minister says planned tax increases on petrol and diesel on January the 1st will be suspended for 6 months, and hikes in regulated electricity and gas prices will be frozen during the winter. The Yellow Vests reject the moves as insufficient and press ahead with plans for a 4th day of protests on Saturday, December the 8th. The government fears the new protests could lead to a new explosion of violence, anticipating participation by the far left and far right. 2019 tax hikes scrapped. On December the 5th, Macron announces that all planned fuel hikes for 2019 will be scrapped. However, he rules out reimposing a fortune tax on high earners. Farmers say they are planning to hold demonstrations next week to support their own demands. For the fourth day of protests on Saturday, 89,000 security force members are deployed, including 8,000 in Paris. Armored vehicles are also mobilized in the capital. The government, as well as most opposition parties and unions, have called for calm. On the eve of a demonstration, Yellow Vest representatives advise against demonstrating in Paris, where museums, monuments, big shops and many metro stations will be closed.